promoting the free exchange of ideas, questioning the status quo, and having some fun along the way. This is the Are We Idiots Show. Now here are your hosts, Mark Weaver and Rich Kroll.
Hello again, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the Are We Idiots Show. We are your hosts, as mentioned, Mark Weaver and Richard Kroll.
Mark, thanks so much for introducing me today. It's another beautiful day in Philadelphia. Or I should say a rare, beautiful day in Philadelphia. But I'm not going to get into the weather like you suggested last week. I'm going to give you a tip for the day.
Well, you just said it was a beautiful day. You are getting into the weather.
But I usually go into more detail about the weather.
You have a tip of the day?
Here's my tip of the day.
Okay, good.
So, folks, for you egg lovers, and I think most of us are, omelets, sunny side up, whatever the case may be, here's a little tip.
The incredible edible egg.
It really is.
Remember that campaign?
I do. Okay. It was a great campaign. By the way, two things. First of all, eating egg yolks is not bad for your cholesterol. It's a complete fallacy, misnomer.
You're challenging the status quo, Rich.
I am. Listen, egg yolks are actually good for your cholesterol. It's good cholesterol that fights the bad cholesterol. So all this egg white nonsense, I guess it's less fattening in some respect, and you get more pure protein with the egg whites. Guys, don't be afraid to keep the egg yolks in your eggs and omelets.
That's Kroller's new segment, Tip of the Day. I like it. All right, folks, welcome back, and we have a great show planned. We're going to start with our Idiot of the Week awards. I have some nominees for Richie. And then we're going to talk about why socialism is on the upswing, at least as far as popularity goes, and we'll delve into that at pretty good detail. And then we're going to... I can talk. We're going to conclude the show.
Easy for you to say.
Kind of got tongue-tied there. We're going to conclude the show with the top 10 worst governments in current day. So Rich is going to sync with his old David Letterman style and count down from 10 to the worst government in existence today. So it should be fun. And here we go. Richie, here's my first nominee. I have two nominees. One's really short, and the other one's a little bit longer. Fresno Fire Department said a man who was house sitting. By the way, Rich, when you're house sitting or when you're home even, and you see a spider in the corner, how do you usually kill it?
Well, depending on the size of the spider, I get some level of napkins or tissue paper or toilet paper.
Me too. Well, evidently, not everyone does it that way.
Not everyone does it that way?
So the Fresno Fire Department said a man who was house sitting for his parents set the home on fire after he used a blowtorch to kill black spiders.
What is he, Freddy Krueger?
Fire crews said there was damage to the second story of the home and in the attic. 29 firefighters responded to the two-alarm fire and were able to extinguish it.
So, I assume it was effective, though.
He did kill the spiders and a lot else.
Killed the spiders and the house.
All right, so that's nominee number one.
That's a good one.
This one I think you'll like a little better. A 41-year-old London man, known only as Alan, has been banned from having sex because of his low IQ.
What?
The judge concluded, quote, I therefore make a declaration. They're English, so they're speaking very formally. I therefore make a declaration that at the present time, Alan does not have the capacity to consent to and engage in sexual relations as his IQ of 48, which is, by the way, considered moderate learning disability, prevents him from understanding what he is doing. He continues, in such circumstances, it is agreed that the present regime for Alan's supervision and for the prevention of future sexual activity is in his best interest. Alan was subjected to close supervision by the local authorities to provide his accommodation. The judge explained that sex requires an understanding and awareness of the, quote, mechanics of the act, and that there are health risks involved, and that sex between a man and a woman may lead to pregnancy. He said the psychiatrist thought Alan, quote, believed that babies were delivered by stork and or found under a bush, and also that sex could give you spots or measles.
They can, can't they?
Well, yeah, it can give you a lot more than that. But
maybe I shouldn't have sex either then.
Just by way of reference for the listeners, if you have an IQ of 48, that's a little bit more than they actually term it as moderate mental retardation, which I guess you're not even supposed to say that term anymore.
That's not politically correct.
Right. But for example, people with IQs between 90 and 110 are considered normal, while those with scores between 20 and 40 are rated as having severe mental retardation. So I know you don't have that problem, Rich, because your IQ is a lot higher. But
I'm like 132.
There we go. So what do you think of those nominees?
Well, first of all, I'm extremely confused why this poor guy was even in a courtroom to discuss his sexual ability or not.
Well, I guess his caretakers or whatever, his court-appointed guardians or whatever, were concerned because he had this vigorous libido, and they were afraid he didn't know what he was doing. It's a groundbreaking case, Rich.
It is groundbreaking to say the least. I don't know who's more of an idiot there. The poor guy who's naturally an idiot, and it's not his fault. Although idiot's improper to use in that case as well. Idiot savant, right? It's no longer politically correct either. The judge, the fact that it got to the court system.
And that they're basically limiting his sexual activity and having him closely monitored.
Listen, somebody burning down their house, killing spiders with a blowtorch is extremely idiotic. But getting multiple parties, lawyers, caretakers, the poor guy who's mentally incapacitated, a judge, the court system, time,
to
energy,
prevent him
effort.
from having sex again. How about just deal with his partner? Say, don't have sex with him. He doesn't know what he's doing.
That whole scenario is so idiotic. It's one level above.
You know what you should do? You should give the Idiot of the Week award to the person who wrote the article for even bothering us with it.
How about the whole city in England? Where is this?
London.
I may vote the whole city of London.
All right, so send them the dollar check, if you will. All right, folks, so we're going to switch over to our big topic of the day. And as you know, I tend to always preface why this subject came up. And it really was two different polls that I saw over the summer. One was, and this was oft repeated, the millennials, the 18 to 34 group. 45% of them view socialism positively. And that's just by way of comparison. Baby boomers, our generation, my generation, and Rich's generation, only 26%. So it's a huge increase in the popularity of socialism. There was another Gallup poll in August, just a couple months ago, that of Democrats, 57% of Democrats have a positive view of socialism, and those of that same group, only 47% viewed capitalism positively. So this is a strange world that we live in, where the anecdotal evidence is so overwhelming that in the last 100 years or so, capitalism has done more for lifting globally people out of poverty than any other form of government and mercantilism. I don't understand where these people are coming from. So that's my first question to you, Rich, is where is this ignorance, and I guess I'm being biased as a podcast host, where is this ignorance coming from?
It's a legitimate question, and you're not being ignorant, although you're typically ignorant anyway. Here's the deal. First of all, where does it come from? The 5 most common political systems around the world are democracy, republic, monarchy, communism, dictatorship. So socialism's not even on the radar. And I looked into this. There's like 150 different types of governments if you break down all the permutations. But the closest, I guess, cousin on here would be communism.
Right. Absolutely.
Right? So,
well, let's just define pure play socialism is where the means of production, and communism obviously falls into this, the means of production are owned by the state. And so, if you have oftentimes the Nordic republics, Sweden and all Denmark and what have you, are cited by Bernie Sanders and some of these democratic socialists as being this ideal, but they have a free market capitalism. That their business structure is free markets. It's not owned by the state. Sorry to interrupt you, as I always do.
Well, stop interrupting me when I'm trying to shout over you. Here's the deal. I don't get it. I really don't get it. First of all, where does this so-called education come from? right? So I couldn't even spell socialism when I was a teenager or in college. I guess I could spell it in college, but there must be.
I have a
groups.
theory, by the way. I have a theory of how this became popular, but I'll let you finish. And then
So how
I'll
all
lay
of a
it on you.
sudden are millennials or the younger generation who really have no experience or historical experience with government types? They've lived under democracy.
Actually, that's a misnomer. We are a representative republic. We're not a democracy.
Okay, but at a high level, and
Yeah.
yes, there's multiple facets of democracy. So I'm just using democracy at a high level terminology.
Gotcha.
But where would the experience come? Hey, I lived in a socialist environment. I lived in a socialist country. I understand because I've experienced the benefits of socialism. Without that, how can you say I support and think socialism's better? My guess is where you're going to go is that it's coming from liberal colleges and universities around the country where the professors in their tree-hugging ascots and capri pants start pontificating to minds that are very open to suggestion and being different, and it's coming. That's where it's coming from.
Well, certainly we could talk about the higher education system and how extremely progressive they are, and I'm sure that contributes some. But I'm going to surprise you with my explanation, at least partial explanation.
Please do.
It's the Republicans' fault.
What?
Yep. So here's my theory. If you remember, during Obama's 8-year terms, what was one of the most common criticisms of Obama? He's a socialist.
He's a socialist.
Guess what millennials thought of Obama? They loved him. He had a 78% approval rating with millennials. So if you say, those Republicans are calling Obama a socialist, which he wasn't a socialist, but he had socialist tendencies. But we're still in a free market economy and capitalism. But if you're a millennial who's just forming their opinion about all this stuff, and for 8 years you heard that Obama's a socialist and the country's going pretty well in their eyes and they love Obama, well, socialism must be good, right?
But the problem with that is it's so superficial, scratching the surface.
Yeah, that's our electorate. They're very superficial.
But that would also imply that millennials can be brainwashed and are bandwagon jumpers without any facts and data behind it.
Well, I also think it has the second part of it is that there's also the Bernie Sanders wing who distort what socialism really is, right? And they point to Denmark and Sweden and say, these are the ideals of socialism. This is how socialism is done right. When and I sent a video around to our text group earlier this week, that's not really true. Yes, some of those Nordic countries do have larger social safety nets, higher taxes, what have you. But the business structure is still risk-reward that you need in capitalism. And yes, that society has cut the extremes out, so there's not as many ultra-rich people, and there's not an entrepreneurial culture like we have in this country. There's no Googles, there's no Apples in the Nordic countries. And there's a bigger social safety net, so you're not starving to death. So that's where I'd like to go next is, do you see the human appeal to everyone being more equal, at least at a gut level? Is that also contributing to the problem here?
At a gut level, yes. I mean, my brother-in-law's father, from Croatia, still believes communism
Really?
is the way to go if done the way it was meant to be, the way Marx wrote it out. Now,
Which has never been done.
which never been done. But in theory, the way Marx wrote it out was pretty smart, and if it could be run that way, it looked good on paper, right? But as we know,
Humans are corruptible.
humans are corruptible, and if you look at the foundation of communism, it's a single person or a group of people in a clique controlling not only production but way of life and brainwashing
Thought,
people.
speech,
Right.
everything.
So I guess I would question this. I would throw it out to you this way: are there any countries that you know of that are defined as socialist and following socialism across a broader range of aspects of what socialism really means?
Well, that's a tough question because, it all depends on how you define socialism. I mean, obviously in this country, there's lots of socialist type programs. Social Security has social right in it, right? Social Security, if you think about it, is basically sorry, got a little in my throat this week.
Allergies?
No, I don't know what it is, but
Fuzz
Social Security
fuzzballs?
is basically everyone pays in, and you get paid out potentially if you live long enough a portion of the pie, and so that is absolutely a socialist like program. Our medicine, our healthcare system. When you think about that, it's not a free market open system. And I think actually that's one of the things I want to talk about on the show today is in the current elections for the midterms, it's a big topic, this pre-existing condition issue. And the Democrats have been hitting the Republicans hard on saying they're going to take away our health care. They don't care about pre-existing conditions. You see, excuse me, TV commercials
Do you need a cup of water?
I don't know. TV commercials every day about, these. Sorry, I'll take a sip. Sorry. Thank you. TV commercials from these candidates saying, well, this person cut out my health care. Republicans are going to cut out my health care. And now Trump's come out saying, no, we're going to take care of pre-existing conditions. That is a joke. And I'll explain if you
I'm not going to let you. I'll tell you why.
No, I have to explain because
Okay.
I don't want to leave our listeners hanging. If I said to you, Rich, hey, I don't have car insurance, and I went out and I just wrecked my car, I'm going to call up Nationwide now and order some car insurance to cover that accident. What would you say?
No.
Why? Because it doesn't work that way, right?
It doesn't.
After you die, you can't order life
No,
insurance.
you can't.
After you're sick, you can't order health insurance.
Correct.
That is insurance. In fact, we did a whole show. Is it really called health insurance? No, that's not insurance. That's called an entitlement. And that's what we have to call it what it is, folks. When they talk about pre-existing conditions and covering pre-existing conditions, that is not health insurance. That's an entitlement. And if you want to make a decision as a society to cover that and pay for that, but that's not insurance. Insurance would be everyone gets health insurance like they get car insurance. When they get out of college, they go off their parents' policy, they get a health policy. It's not tied to your employment, and you go through life and always have a health policy. Then you wouldn't have to worry about pre-existing conditions when you switch jobs. So frustrating.
Well, now I'm really confused. I think the coughing has knocked your brain cells out of whack. What does this have to do with what we're talking
Well,
about?
because it's a socialist type program
Okay,
where
but
you're
it's a bit of
you're sharing the resources.
I get it, but it's a bit of a tangent off where I'm trying to
did.
go with this.
I did. Go for it.
And you,
And
again,
I'll just keep choking.
you slipped in a political agenda there. Do you need more water?
No, good. I have my own behind me.
Here's where I was going with it.
Go ahead.
There is really no pure socialist country out there today.
Right. There's communists,
There's communism.
and they're not even pure.
And they're not even pure.
Right.
So if you look at the UN does a lot of studies ranking the best countries to live in, ranking the worst countries to live in, and it's based on all sorts of categories, including life expectancy, education, gender equality, financial wealth, type of government. And, the top 15 in order from 1 to 15 are Norway, Australia, Switzerland, Germany, Denmark, Singapore, Netherlands, Ireland, Iceland, Canada, the United States at number 11, Hong Kong, New Zealand, Sweden, and Liechtenstein.
I always love that.
There's like 16 people that live in Liechtenstein, and they get to be classified as a country. Anyway, the point is, if you look at the majority of all those governments there, there's some form of democracy.
Absolutely.
Right? So where does this socialism thing, even if you look across the entire globe, there's no real evidence that socialism is the way to go. And why all the millennials and young people are jumping on the bandwagon with Bernie Sanders,
It's because they hear him say, well, these rich people are just ripping us off, and capitalism means that the rich and powerful take advantage of us, middle class and underclass people, and isn't this unfair? It's sad, but the reality is capitalism, because you can't have reward without risk. And it's sad that some people are going to suffer. And it's actually analogous to what we talked about last week with the group identity thing. when people use an outlier as the argument for castigating the whole system, and that's what happens is, there are people that take advantage of people. There are the bankers in Wall Street that didn't go to jail after the financial crisis, and they're used, these extreme outliers are used to say, well, capitalism's bad. See, these people got away with abusing the system and getting away with these scams.
Well, I guess in a perfect utopia where you get to start over from scratch with a white piece of paper on Mars, you can create the best combination of what's good about the right democracy aspects, take a little bit from socialism, take a little bit from the monarchy or republic, and mix it all together. But folks, that's not reality. And I'm not going to say listen, I'm going to say hey. I'm going to try to switch from listen to hey. It's amazing to me that there's this much percentage appeal or support when it doesn't exist. And the closest thing is communism. So to answer, I didn't quite answer your question earlier about, yes, on paper, socialist and communism premise where making everybody equal is pretty good. Not for the people that work the hardest, have the best ideas, invent things, take risks, are the best thinkers that generate wealth for everybody or fix problems for everybody. They should be the highest paid. People that go out and own their own business, employ many people. But I do get where it would be kind of cool where there wasn't as big a gap between the wealthy and the impoverished. And then you have all these struggling people that then create the welfare problem and all the programs that throw billions and trillions of dollars of freebies to people that need it. It would be kind of neat if we all could live in a community where there wasn't such extremes.
That's a pipe dream because it creates what's called a moral hazard, right? And the moral hazard is that if you know you're going to get the same as your neighbor, regardless of your efforts, then why would you work, right? So you see this all the time with road crews and stuff like that. Hey, most of them aren't working, right? And again, it's because the moral hazard is, and same thing with Social Security. I think we have a moral hazard with Social Security problem. Sorry.
You are struggling today.
Sorry, listeners. Got something in my throat. But the reality is that if you don't feel like you have to save for retirement, you don't. And that's what Social Security did. It created a moral hazard. And there's all kinds of examples of this. So that's my take on it. Moral hazard makes socialism, communism, anything where the state is in charge of these things, it makes takes away the entrepreneurial, the reward factor, and it drags everyone down. That's what the history's been.
I agree. I mean, socialism/communism has a lot of, ideals that are close to dictatorships or, other forms of government which are really bad for the people. So let me a quick overview of communism, which is the closest to socialism. In most cases, a communist state is based on the ideology of communism as taught by Marx and or Lenin, which I brought up earlier. The theories on paper were pretty strong. However, these political systems are not true to the ideals espoused by these revolutionary thinkers. Communist states are often dominated by a single party or group of people. A planned economy is often part of the governing class, and in many cases, resources are taken and then redistributed to others at the top of the system. Sometimes communists call themselves worker states, or socialists, but there are very real differences in their operation. In a lot of cases, citizens are required and forced to do certain jobs, have many of their life decisions forced upon them, especially concerning where they can live, what jobs they can have, and who they're allowed to vote for. Communism is often considered an authoritarian political system. So if you peel back socialism, it never ends up in what Bernie Sanders or what Obama, who was thought as a socialist by Republicans, ends up being. So there's no factual evidence behind it to support.
Right. And I would say, back to your earlier questions, I think the closest we have, and again, it's all shades of gray. The closest we have, because we have some socialist
How many shades of gray?
50.
50.
Not that I ever watched that movie, by the way.
I hope not. I to this day will not watch that movie. I'm sure our wives have watched it.
No, I don't think
I
so.
hope not.
No, but I was going to say, we all have shades of socialism in every country, but I guess Western Europe, the Western European democracies are the closest to socialism, in a practical matter, because they have very high social safety nets, very high tax structures, central planning, central government controls a lot of these things, the cradle to grave type idea. And of course, what has resulted in France, Germany, not as much, but still more than the United States, certainly Spain, Portugal, Italy, some of the Nordic countries, they have very low innovation. They have higher unemployment than we have. They have high debt, and I would even say almost unsustainable debt as a country. France and Italy and Portugal and Spain and even Ireland are in that realm. They have a big social safety net, but it's as the birth rates decline, it's unsustainable, and they're on a bad collision course, just like we are going to be in this country if we keep spending.
Well, again, I know people will say, "Oh, you're using one statistical measurement, or you're looking at one survey, or one." No, I look at a lot of stuff. So another group, the Legatum Institute, which is a private research organization based.
Demi Legatum.
Very funny. You're getting funnier as we do more episodes. The Legatum Institute, based in Dubai, so not a democracy-based,
right,
biased, skewed opinion, gathers data from 110 nations covering more than 90% of the world's population, and their 10 best governed countries, measured by different things like levels of competition and corruption found in each government, as well as citizens' confidence in elections, the judicial system, the military, etc., the financial stability, and opportunity for its citizens, are in order from 1 to 10.
This is not your top 10 countdown list.
No,
right? Don't steal any thunder.
This is still the good
Okay,
countries. Good. Switzerland, Denmark, the U.S., number 3 on this one was number 11 in the UN's findings. New Zealand, Canada, Sweden, Finland, Australia, the U.K., Netherlands. So again, and I know there's different forms of democracy, but they're all democracies. And although not perfect, and the U.S. is far from perfect, why do we recognize, in our world, we tend to recognize what's bad, right? We won the Super Bowl, but we'll point out the 2 or 3 plays that were bad.
That's just Philadelphians.
It could be just Philadelphians. But
you're right. It makes the news. The news, there's all kinds of surveys around this that people, and I think it's probably evolutionary biology kicking in, people react to fear much more than reward.
Right. So we live in one of the top 10, top 3 governments in the world. Not perfect, but compared to the rest of the world, why don't we focus on what's good? How about that, folks? I don't care if you're old, young, millennial. Can we focus on what's good unless there are things we can change?
Is that your second Kroller tip of the day?
Maybe it is.
Save that for next week.
Can we mix that with eggs in any way?
The incredible edible egg. Okay, final comments before we go on to the next segment there, Richie.
Support of socialism is completely unfounded. It's a bandwagon, jumping, brainwash nonsense. And if I could slice out the couple of things that work in socialism and add them and create a socialist democracy, great, but goodness.
My final comment to millennials or anyone who thinks that democratic socialism or whatever socialism is a good idea, don't listen to Bernie Sanders. I'll give him credit. He's a true believer, but the guy cannot do math. And I'm not the math genius that you are.
You're far
but
from that.
I'm pretty good with math and economics. And Bernie Sanders has done the least research of any political candidate ever. I mean, just one thing. If you took all the money from the top 1%, it wouldn't even cover the student loans. And so he's promising that we can solve this by just taxing the rich. If we took all the money from the rich, we still wouldn't be able to cover just the student loans. I think it's $1.4 trillion or something like that. So when Bernie talks, everything sounds great, that these rich people are taking advantage of us and all this, healthcare should be free, quote, free meaning take it from someone else's paycheck to pay for it. The government doesn't have any money. It just takes money to pay for things. So that's my dilly.
Is Bernie the new E.F. Hutton?
All right, folks.
By the way, you managed to get in a couple political side agendas into the conversation. That was very well done.
And this surprises you how?
None.
I was just glad I didn't choke for the last 5 minutes.
That was really annoying, by the way.
All right, folks. So we're going to turn to finish out the show with Kroler's top 10 list of the worst governments on earth present day. So, Richie, lay it on me.
So here's what's interesting. I looked at a couple different surveys. Again, the UN's one of them. There's a lot of different ways world groups put this survey out.
I'm very impressed. You've done a lot of research for this
I've
show.
done too much. I don't have even time for this, but I did it so you would have a better show. But there's a lot of opinion in this, right? Because these surveys are based on opinion and also some hard facts, there's a lot of different top 10. In fact, one was surprising. It listed Italy as the 9th worst country in the world to live in. So clearly there's a big disparity in how these lists
Well, if
are
you're
put
just
together.
counting on government, I would probably agree with that. But from its natural beauty, it's amazing.
Well, there's other things that go into it. Financial, opportunity, how the citizens are treated, healthcare,
Right.
government oppression, human rights.
But when you list these 10, that is the definitive list. I think we all can agree on that.
Most of the time, whatever list I come up with is definitive, and there's really no argument that can come in. So
All right,
here's
number
how-
10.
Here's how I did this, though.
Oh, okay.
I'm gonna go because it's really a grouping. Because it's so disparate, there were 4 common to most lists. So I'm gonna list those as 4, 3, 2, 1.
Okay.
But I'm gonna list 10 through 7 and
In a group.
6, or whatever how it works. 10 through
Okay.
8 through, as a group. So
I think the listeners will get the gist.
yeah, especially if they're not math people like you. So call it 10 through 7, I'm going to list African nations
Okay.
because there were so many different ones. There was Nigeria. There was the Ivory Coast. There was the Democratic Republic of the Congo. There was Sierra Leone, Ethiopia, Zimbabwe, the Sudan. So Africa.
Take your pick, basically.
Take your pick. And a lot of it's just based on even horrific stuff like the Congo
Genocide.
genocide, right? If you don't agree with the government, they murder you. But like Congo's the rape capital of the world.
Oh, yeah.
So
Yeah. Well, they've had a civil war going on there in Sudan. It's bled into Sudan, right? I think I'm getting my geography right.
you are. Most of these, unfortunately, most of the countries in Africa are suffering from, political unrest, famine, human rights violations, some really egregious. Peaceful protests are turned into massacres, with the government's leaders ordering that the protesters be shot and killed. Governments ruling by fear, terrorist groups taking, I guess, home there and demolishing churches and schools, really just terrorizing.
So not a
countries.
representative republic like we have?
Correct. But there's other things, just simply like famine and access to clean water. Water.
You're a definite Philadelphian if you say water.
Access to just medicine and basic medical facilities so you can have babies. There's a super high rate of infantile deaths or whatever you call it.
Right.
So I'm going to just say the country of Africa.
All right, next
Not
grouping.
the country of Africa, the continent of Africa. The next grouping is the Middle East.
And
they're
in the news constantly, but yep, that's great.
and then there's so many. Whether you group it, there's Pakistan, Syria, Iraq, Afghanistan, Iran, on and on and on, and kind of the same types of reasons.
Right.
More government oppression, more terrorism, but these are rich areas, oil-rich countries,
Yeah, and usually ruling families.
ruling families, and the poverty's shame, and the human rights against women, and just the murder of women and children is it's really concerning. egregious, and it can piss you off.
And that 4 or 5 years ago, Egypt fell to the Arab Spring. Tunisia, I guess, was another one. But there's been this Arab Spring, and it's basically died out. And these Arab rulers have largely retained their control on power. So democracy is not coming to the Middle East anytime soon, folks.
So here's my top 4
Okay,
worst countries
go
to
for
live
it.
in. Number 4, Syria. 10,000 people have been killed every year, as stated by United Nations, based on an average since 2011, due to the crackdown on any opposition that is shown to the government. Even with a gigantic amount of sanctions opposed by the international community, Syria still continues to have political uprisings and mass executions every single year.
Is that a problem?
Apparently not for their governments.
Not to mention gassing their own citizens.
I said not to mention that. Number 4, Iraq, which is on many number 1 lists as well. Even after the death of Saddam Hussein in 2007, over 1 million people, including innocent Iraqi citizens, were killed in suicide attacks, being indirect targets of bombing raids and other violence due to the ongoing war. The infrastructure is poor, with over 50% of Iraqi citizens are homeless. Being an oil-rich nation, this country has lots of potential, but with the current crisis in the Middle East, it will be difficult for the country to ever become anywhere back to whole again.
And I'm going to say something controversial to our listeners, but it's true. We were the ones who invaded Iraq on a false premise. We killed 1 million Iraqis. So people should remember that we're not perfect, folks. And we killed 1 million Iraqis on a false premise that they had weapons of mass destruction. Thank you, Dick Cheney. Thank you, George Bush.
Well, you're getting a lot of political comments in today.
It's egregious. It's
What
criminal.
am I on? Number 2, Somalia.
Oh, yeah. Black Hawk down.
Black Hawk down. Here in Somalia, they are wrought with drought, famine, and disease, kill thousands of people every year, and it's common stuff.
Warlords run the country, basically.
Warlords run the country. Civil wars and tribal uprisings, kidnappings, government squashing of human rights violations, again, mass executions, genocide, everything. It's
Everything
really awful.
bad.
Everything bad.
All right, number 1, we need to move on.
Number 1, can I get a drum roll?
Or I'll just cough again.
Please cough. North Korea.
There we go. Little Rocket Man.
Little Rocket Man. Obviously, North Korea is ruled by...
But Trump's in love with them, Rich.
It's amazing, isn't
They're
it?
in love.
North Korea is ruled by Little Rocket Man. The country is completely cut off from the outside world. There are no communications except through government-sanctioned channels. Electricity is very scarce. Here's something crazy. North Korea appears as a black circle from satellite feeds in outer space, where every else in the world, appears
There's lights.
If anyone disagrees with Kim Jong-il, they are executed. There are many stories of his executions, even stories of him executing his own family members by having starving wild dogs rip them to pieces while they're alive.
Oh, yeah. He used to kill people with anti-aircraft guns. Instead of a firing squad, he'd have an anti-aircraft gun to do it. By the way, do you know he's an awesome golfer? Most people in North Korea believe that he shot 18 when the first time he ever played golf. A hole-in-one on every hole. That's what he told people.
He shot an 18?
An 18. He got a hole-in-one on every hole.
That's even impossible on a miniature golf course.
But that's what people believe in North Korea because he's an infallible leader.
Well, if he really did that, maybe I'll move him back to number 2.
All right, folks. Well, I hope you enjoyed that show today, despite my coughing. I apologize about that. But tune in next week when we do a public service show, I'm going to call it that, where we talk about financial literacy. And this was stemmed from a survey I saw recently where a high degree of people, I think it's upwards of 40% of people, can't pass a 5-question quiz on very rudimentary stuff. I'll give it to Rich next week, and we'll see how he does.
I love it.
Hopefully it does better than last week's quiz.
Well, I thought you were trying to trick me last week. Yes, there are more men that murder than women, but I thought you were trying to trick me.
All right. And then we we also frequently talk about our federal deficit of $21 trillion. But just to give you a little tease for next week, the New York Fed came out with a quarterly report on household finances. Outstanding student loan debt, $1.4 trillion. Auto loan debt, $1.24 trillion. Credit card balances, $14 billion. So, rose by $14 billion. So it's really scary how financially illiterate our households are. And we did a show called The Immediate Gratification Nation early on. We touched on some of these topics, but we're going to go in much more detail and give you a roadmap to be able to do personal finance 101. And as always, please remember, if what you see or hear sounds idiotic, then we're just the guys to help you sort it out. See you all next week. Take care.
Thank you for listening to the Are We Idiots Show. Please subscribe on iTunes, Google Play, or Stitcher so you can enjoy all episodes.